All right. Big win for Boston College as they go down to Atlanta and pound the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets 38-23. It was a well-grounded execution by BC as they scored 38 points and had 3 turnovers. We're going to talk all about that on today's show.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Saturday, everyone. This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black, joined by Mitchell Wolf. The Eagles go down to Atlanta and win 38-23. And this is our instant reaction game episode, and it's brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right, Mitch, how are you feeling after today's game?
I'm pretty much as good as you can feel. I think that the final score doesn't exactly tell the full story of how competitive this game was for the vast majority of it, but it was another time where BC got down in the second half and on the scoreboard and then rallied back, and they were really able to put the gas pedal down and put this team away with it, like as it says in the title, the run game and turnovers.
Yep. And obviously the big story again, he's so funny. He disappears from the running game. You sent me a message that he was running soft for a while, but then he hits another level, and it's Thomas Castellanos. He was the story of the game again.
Yeah, I got burned on that comment pretty quickly, but it was weird in the beginning of the game because I felt like there was one time where he slid for a loss of 1, and I didn't feel like maybe he just wasn't seeing the holes develop as well as he wanted to. But I think definitely a switch got flipped and he started running a lot harder, started bursting through those holes. And obviously another great game for the offensive line, clearing huge lanes in the run game. You had some good plays that got called back for holding, which was a shame. And then obviously Castellanos had all day to throw, some of those deeper passes, some of them didn't hit, but he was standing back there with just a wide open. There was one play that was funny where Mahogany had had nobody to block. He was just kind of standing at the line of scrimmage, looking around because he had nothing to do. But yeah, I think some of the comments saying this is, and we talked about this before we started the show, that this is definitely BC's most complete game of the season. It's their best game of the season. It's obviously not a perfect game. There were mistakes and some coaching decisions I disagreed with, but I think you saw all units of the team make significant contributions throughout the entirety of the game. You had a few, mistakes here and there by the defense. You had some bad play calling I didn't love from the offense and mistakes on their end too. But, for the most part, we saw all three phases of the game, even too. I know obviously they missed a field goal. It was a decently long one for a college kicker. I think it was 49 yards. But punting game was good. Return game was pretty good. We were texting about Jane Williams being back on punt returns, but after really the first one, he started actually fair catching. He had a nice return at the end of the game. Yep. So yeah, I was really impressed. And again, this team is very tenacious. They're fighting to the end. And even if they get down by, I think they were only down by 1 point because of the missed extra point. But after that, they roared back and really established themselves.
Yeah, and I feel like by the end of this game, they could have just continued pounding the ball down. They had to let off the gas basically near the end.
I almost wondered if they were going to keep running the ball with time expiring as kind of a poke at Miami. Just so, Miami's going to screw this up. We don't screw these kind of things up, because the runs on that drive were so funny because the running backs would be enveloped by defenders, but then the offensive line would just keep pushing the pile for, an extra 5 or 8 yards. And actually I got, as we were recording, I tweeted out the gif of Kylo Ren saying "more" from The Last Jedi, and I said BC's offensive line this drive, and it was liked by none other than Christian Mahogany just a few minutes ago. So
he's quickly back into the locker room.
He's on his phone in the locker room very quickly.
So yeah, that I want to say too, we talk about the offensive line, and you go back to some of our earlier episodes, and a lot of fans were very upset about Matt Applebaum, and I feel like his redemption arc or whatever he needs, I think he's proven himself. Let's just leave it at that. The offensive line looks what you would expect from Boston College. And yes, you can credit that to the players. You've got guys like Christian Mahogany, but they're playing better than any other offensive line BC's had that included ones with Zion Johnson and those great ones that everyone likes to look at for 2020 and 2021. This one's better. And you have to give some credit to Applebaum for putting this all together.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, obviously last year, Googs just doesn't have the guys to work
Right
to operate a real FBS Power 5 offensive line. It's just, and so, the deck was stacked against him, and obviously there's going to be a natural regression or improvement with Applebaum taking over, but it's not that this offensive line is just average. Like, and that's what we were saying last year. It's like this offensive line just needs to be competent. This is an offensive line that is dominating football games. They are not allowing pressure on the quarterback. They are just completely owning the line of scrimmage in the run game. And BC has shown that with their aggressiveness on fourth down, because they know that every time they're going to push the defensive line off the ball 1 to 2 yards and make it super easy for them to convert on those plays. So it is just such a joy to watch, because you're watching the offense really just be able to operate with such a high floor, because it's like, okay, we have such a strong foundation with the blocking that they can do a lot of different kinds of things. And obviously, again, you have a few mistakes here and a few penalties, what have you, but the vast majority of this game, they are just owning the line of scrimmage, winning in all kinds of different schemes. We saw some zone schemes, we saw some gap schemes, very effective in pass protection. So yeah, I mean, that's just such a joy to watch them really dominate pretty much every opponent they come up against.
And you got to think the coaching staff loves this, that they can line up and just basically say, screw you. And we're going to run the ball and you're not going to stop us. And now Hafley has said that that's what he's wanted to do since he's been here. This is the first team I feel like he legitimately can do that whenever he wants. Like there's been other seasons where you'd hope it, and then maybe there'd be like a run by Dracovic, but never consistently like the level that they're doing this year.
Yeah. And they didn't even have I would say probably their best running back in terms of talent in Pat Garwo, because he was out today after suffering an injury at the end of the Army game. But I mean, Kai Robichaux really showed up and carried the bell. I think what did he have? 165 yards, 2 touchdowns, had some big runs to really ice the game down the stretch. And he's the kind of running back where when you're a defense and you're tired in the end of a game, and the running back, and the good thing is they do have Alex Broom, who can take some carries away from him and give him a spell. And even Castellanos, obviously he's not the biggest guy and you don't want him carrying the ball all the time, but that takes some load off the running back. So Robichaux only has 21 carries. And I think he had 3 catches. So pretty light load in terms of wear and tear. So he's decently fresh going down the stretch, whereas the defense is tired and doesn't want to tackle this guy who runs with incredible power, runs really well behind his pad. So he's always keeps his feet moving. So, really, and again, kind of a closer type running back. And that's how he played against the Army game, where he was, there for emergency purposes, but he helped them ice that game down the stretch in the final drive.
All right. In a moment, Mitch and I are going to look at the defense, talk about some of the things they did right, some of the things they did wrong. Look at the secondary, who had a big game. We'll talk all about that in just a moment. Now, are you in the midst of making a major life decision? I remember that when I was deciding on buying a house with my wife, I had some issues about trying to figure out where I wanted to move. My brain I had a piece of paper with 800 things on it, and I could not decipher what I needed to do. My brain was getting in the way. I knew what I should do, but I didn't do it. Now, that's where BetterHelp can come in. Whether or not you've been in therapy, this is the place to start. Therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. Like, you know what you should do, what's good for you, but you just can't do it. These folks can get there for you. If you've ever thought of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnCollege to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnCollege. Now, it's the weekend, and all eyes are on college football and the NFL. And with FanDuel, you can snap into action with the NFL season. With FanDuel, the America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you had bet on BC to win today, hey, if you picked the money line, you're having a great Saturday. And I haven't looked at my other picks this week. Mitch, have you looked at your picks? Has any of them played yet?
I honestly haven't. I don't know. I think a lot of our games might be later. So
I was gonna say we have later games going on, but
yeah,
with FanDuel, you can find games that are on, coming up. It's easy to use with spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black. BC, 38-23. Their fourth win, their third win in a row. Some good momentum heading into next weekend's game against the Yukon Huskies, which we'll talk about at another time. Now let's look at the other side of the ball. Mitch, how did you think? Talk about the highs and lows of this defense in this game.
I mean, it was another rough third quarter for BC's defense. You have the interception by Castellanos, and then they turned that into a big explosive scramble by Haynes King, who is definitely a solid rushing threat at quarterback, despite what some of the stats may say. But other than that, and then they have another really bad drive where I think it was mostly passing, where Georgia Tech really just threaded a bunch of good passes together, and then they were able to score on that drive to take the lead. But man, I mean, I know it's hard to say, a team had a good defensive performance when they allowed 452 total yards. 23 points is, that's pretty decent, but BC got really killed on the ground. But honestly, going into this game, with how I viewed Georgia Tech's passing offense, I was like, honestly, I don't really care what Georgia Tech can do on the ground, because that plays into BC's hand of how they want to play this game. And I just don't think they're going to be able to do it consistently enough to where it favors them. And, I definitely, Haynes King had a really good day on the ground. He's a good athlete, has more ability to create than I thought, but his inability to really consistently hit passes, aside from that one drive, really doomed Georgia Tech, because they just were not hitting on those passes. He was sailing passes out of bounds. And obviously a lot of credit goes to BC's defensive backs, specifically Elijah Jones and Amari Jackson. And granted, they gave up a few receptions here and there. That's going to happen when you play cornerback, but especially with BC playing a little more zone in this game, I think, than they've played over more recent weeks. They were using some more cover 2, some more cover 4, that kind of stuff. But I mean, obviously Elijah Jones has 2 picks in this game, both on like late drives by Georgia Tech. So that, kind of puts the game away, and 2 interceptions. I guess this brings his interception total to 3. So he has more interceptions this year than he had the entire during his entire 5-year career prior to this season, which is pretty crazy. But man, and then of course, Amari Jackson has one of the sickest, most incredible interceptions I've ever seen. Backhand catching the ball and pinning it on his hip and getting it back for a pick 6. That was awesome. And especially for Jackson, who has had some struggles in recent weeks, for him to have such a good game. He broke, I think he also broke a pass. Too. Exactly. A lot of Georgia guys on BC. So I think they were really happy to have this outcome. But, I think he broke up another pass, and Jones had 2 or 3 more breakups. So really good performance by them. And, it was I'll have to go back and rewatch with BC's defensive line. They were doing a lot of stunts. They blitzed a little more, and that burned them a few times here and there. And they didn't sack King a lot, but they did get some pressure on him. They hit him a few times, and I think that really got him off his rhythm, so that he, it's going to show 3 interceptions in the stat sheet. Some of them are, a lot of those were like late in the game when he's trying to lead a comeback, so it's not as bad. But and then obviously the first one was an incredible catch by Jackson. So, but he was still just not as accurate as I anticipated, and I think that's really that and the turnovers are the big reason why BC was able to win this game.
Now, the big thing here, when I was watching this, it looked to me, and I heard hers mention it at one point too, that BC was basically daring Georgia Tech to run the ball.
Yes, they absolutely were.
And we're okay with giving up yards on the ground in order to prevent them from getting beat deep. What did you see in terms scheme wise?
I would definitely agree with that. And Herzlich did mention it. A lot more 3 down fronts. So you have 3 defensive linemen with their hand in the dirt on the line of scrimmage. Sometimes it would be only 2, but there was still a defensive end, so that I would still call that a 3 down front. And BC has also I'm trying to think what. Herzlich called it a floater. I call it a predator or hunter, where the defensive end is kind of just loping around the defensive line, kind of to mess with the offensive line, so they don't really know where he's going to blitz. And BC had a lot of stunting and line games on passing down, especially when they blitzed, which I didn't love the effectiveness of it. But right now they just don't have a pass rusher that's consistently winning one-on-one straight up. But in terms of the run game, they were definitely having light boxes. and Georgia Tech obviously wants this because they spread teams out so much, getting the receivers out very wide. And I think BC is still have Vinny DePalma out there who's going to be a run stuffer. So if it wasn't like they were having just Arnold and Sione Hala and Blackwell out there, and they played a bit, but it wasn't a complete capitulation on that front. But they were definitely saying like, we are fine if you want to run the ball. And they hit on a few plays. They, absolutely, they had some good runs. But I mean, BC also did a good job of creating tackles for loss. I think they had 4 tackles for loss, according to Game on Paper. Let's see, 38% of Georgia Tech's runs were stopped, so that's 2 yards or less gained. And Georgia Tech's success rate when running the ball was pretty good, but I wouldn't say anything to write home. It was okay. So it was 50% successful in rushing, which is pretty good for running the ball. But at the end of the day, like some of those successful rushes came later in the game when it didn't really matter because they needed to throw the ball to win. And at the end of the day, they couldn't do that.
All right. In a moment, Mitch and I are going to wrap things up by giving our final thoughts on today's win. We'll give you some names that we noticed, some plays that stood out to us, and everything in between. We'll be back in just a moment. Now, if you know me, folks, I am a fan of my bird dogs. I've got multiple pairs of bird dog shorts here in the Black household, and I love them. I have any color you can think of, but the reason I wear them is they are so comfortable. They make myself look slimmer and thinner, and they are much more comfortable than regular shorts. They're functional for any occasion. I wear them, going to a football game or going for a walk with my wife. They're perfect. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege or enter promo code LockedOnCollege at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you. This is Locked On BC, AJ Black. We're wrapping up our instant reaction to today's win. BC's now 4-3. They're over 500. They have 2 ACC wins, and got to feel good about where things are at for BC with the remaining schedule that they have ahead of us. So you have to think that if they continue playing the way that they're going to be playing, there's going to be a game after Miami. So that's good. Now, Mitch, I want to give you what I wanted to talk about, just some random things that have popped up in the game. My first thing that I noticed was the big catch by George Tagas. After watching George Tagas drop 2 passes in the first half and look just like he's kind of looked like all season, which is struggling in the pass, catching the ball. Yeah, as a receiver, doing fine as a blocker. He makes a big catch and a big play for BC. So I was glad to see him do that. But I also want to say Jeremiah Franklin made a couple nice catches as well. So
yeah, Jeremiah Franklin had a very good game. I think both of his catches went for first downs. I think both of them were on third down too. Tagas, it's funny because when they ran that play, they had that boot out to the right and you can kind of see the tight end leaking upfield. I was like, even like as Castellanos kind of started doing the bootleg, I was like, oh man, they're going to try to throw to Tagas here. He better freaking catch it. And he did. Thankfully he did. And that was just probably the funniest one in the game where Mark Herzlich tried to say that George Tagas is a great athlete with the speed to run away from defenders as he was being tracked down from behind by defenders, which was just hilarious. And luckily they did score. But yeah, I mean, hopefully that catch is kind of the start of a redemption tour for Tagas, because obviously there's 2. The first was a drop and also not the best pass. So I'm kind of, both can be true. Second one was a really bad drop where they tried to hit him in the flat, and that probably cost BC a touchdown. Luckily, it didn't matter at the end of the day, but they did have to settle for a field goal in that drive. But yeah, that was very funny. Also, just a weird game to watch from the ACC Network's presentation. The referees who had to have like a 10-minute conversation every time a penalty got called, which I've never seen before. So that was frustrating to watch as just a consumer of the game. And
terrible spotting too.
Some very bad spots. Most of them hurting BC, I would say. Which I mean that can happen sometimes. But yeah, it was weird. Other players that stood out. I think rewatching this game, I'm going to focus a lot on the defensive line because they did a lot of stunting and looping, like line games, like I said. And they obviously had some of those zero blitzes, which the one time they got some pressure sometimes, and then other times they let the back leak out of the backfield for a big gain. So, that's the kind of the risk you take there. In terms of the offense, I think it was good to see. I think Castellanos played a very good game. I mean, the interception I didn't mind the play call. You're in the territory on the field where you want to take that deep passing shot that can kind of put the game, honestly, like really put Georgia Tech on their heels. So I get it. I thought it was a good throw. Just Griffin, I think maybe lost it in the sun, and that's why the defender was able to make the play on the ball. So, I kind of take that out of the equation for him as a bad play. And he had, and a lot of his incompletions, he had, I think 2 were batted at the line. He had, 2 or 3 drops. So I think when PFF has their adjusted completion percentage, his regular completion percentage is like at 58.6. So I think when you adjust that for the drops and throws getting batted at the line, that's going to go up very far. And I think we need a bit more of a sample size to see how they're adjusting this passing offense to better fit his skill set. But, in terms of for how BC needs to finish the year, you've got a really good stretch of games here that can get you into bowl eligibility territory. Obviously, UConn, which I have to believe this team is going to be very locked in for after last year's debacle. Then you are on the road at Syracuse on a short week, and Syracuse is, kind of crashing and burning at this point. Home against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's figuring stuff out a little bit, but, still not the best team, and BC's at home for that game, so that's an advantage. At Pitt, and Pitt is looking. They detonated the Pitt super weapon against Louisville, so we'll see if they can kind of keep figuring stuff out. And then Miami at the end of the year, and Miami's, it's not trending in a good direction. They've got time to fix it, but I think we're looking at we have a very different outlook on the season compared to how it started with the Northern Illinois game.
It just feels like right now they should be in every game, and the way.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And when you have a guy like Castellanos, you're going to be in every game because he's just you get a player like that, and we talk about him all the time, but it's a special player, so that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. So Mitch, we gotta head out. This was just a quick episode to really kind of talk about the end of this game, but I have one comment in a comment section that I want to put up.
I know which one it is. Yep.
How many weeks in a row has Mitch missed his pick for the BC game?
I mean, to be fair, I picked them to beat Virginia. I said they'd win big. They just didn't win big. They won small. I feel like I didn't pick them to beat Army. So I guess it's 2 weeks in a row that I have missed on these picks. And again, that's based on everything I've seen. I was like, I don't really have faith in this team. I want to see them do it for a complete game. And honestly, like this is, and I know Georgia Tech's not like the best team, but doing this on the road, and I think, like we said, putting together the most complete game of the season, maybe now I have a little more faith in what this team can do picking games going forward.
Jeff Hafley is now 3-0 against Georgia Tech.
I mean, man, even though it's a different coach, he just has their number. I think they've won each of these games by at least 2 scores. So yeah.
All right, Mitch, where can people find your work?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. I'll be having my 3 stars of the game article probably published tomorrow. I want to wait a little bit so we can get some more of the advanced numbers from PFF and Game on Paper, so we can have a little more context for those players. But I mean, if you watch the game, you probably can make a pretty educated guess as to who my 3 stars are going to be. So, but I will save it and leave it for people to actually read. So,
all right. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. I will have PFF scores up tomorrow, along with my thoughts of the game up for VIP users tonight. We'll also have BC Hockey Blogger recapping a big hockey game tonight between number 2 Denver and number 3 BC. And I'll be talking about that on tomorrow's episode as well. So be sure to check us out on all our socials and everything else. For Mitch, this is AJ. Thank you for all of you for joining us today. We'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On BC, your team every day.